Okay.
Nobody needs to sign in.
Members, make sure everybody you sign in for the voting today. Are we getting started? Madam Clerk, would you call the roll? I have my pen and everything upstairs. Sapicki? Roll.
Chairman White.
Thank you. Thank you. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, you have 14 members present. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Members, welcome to the full education of the full Committee of Education. Sorry, I got a little bit of a sore throat today, so it may be hard to understand me, but we've got a really full calendar. Some committee members, we're going to move as fast as we can, go through this. If you have a question, just get our attention. We'll recognize you, but we do want to move through our calendar fast. Before we begin, let's bow our heads for a word of prayer as we think about the responsibility we have as committee people over education. Holy Father, thank you for the blessing of life and the blessing of opportunity, and help us to listen and make wise decisions on what is best for our young people across the state. Watch over our teachers this day, administrators, and all those who have the responsibility of working with these young souls. We ask this in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Members, anybody have a personal order you would like to ask before we get started? I see none. Okay, we'll go ahead. Before we begin, we do have a couple of confirmations that we have to work through. And we have 2 advisory board members, and we have 3 board of trustees members. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and I just need to put them on. Yeah, go ahead and put them in order. We're going to look at House Joint Resolution 167, House Joint Resolution 168, and House Joint Resolution 169. 167 is the confirmation of the University of Tennessee Board of Trustees, Mr. David Watson. As I call your name, you'll come up and sit at the seat. President Board, good to see you. And then we have HJR 168, the confirmation of University of Tennessee Board of Trustees, Donnie Smith. And then item number 4 on our calendar, House Joint Resolution 169, the confirmation of Mr. John Compton for the University Board of Trustees. Okay, that is John Compton. All right, now you hear who is introducing Mr. John Compton? I'm told that is me. We're moving pretty fast. If I'm doing that, then I have to pass the gavel over to Chairman Sapicki, since I'm leading this. Chairman Sapicki.
Motion. Second. Chairman White, you have a motion and a second on HJR 169. You are available for a brief opening.
Thank you very much. And just a brief introduction from Mr. Compton. Know him well. After graduating from the University of Tennessee with a degree in finance, John joined PepsiCo Company. He began his PepsiCo career working third shift making grandma's cookies. He rose to the sales and marketing ranks before becoming vice chairman and president of Frito-Lay North America. In addition, he served as chief executive officer of PepsiCo North America to include Pepsi Beverages, Frito-Lay, and Quaker Foods. He later went on to serve as PepsiCo's global president before leaving after a 30-year career. He joined the private equity firm of Clayton, is it Dubilier and Rice in 2013 and became a partner. He currently serves as the chair of 4 portfolio companies. CD&R is one of the largest buyout firms in the world. John serves on the board of directors of First Horizon National Corporation, where he chairs the nominating and governance committee. He previously served on the board of directors in the PepsiCo bottling company. With that, I would just like to, at this point, I think what we will do is do the other nominations and then go out of session and let all the committee members ask questions of that. So thank you so very much for giving of your time on this.
Thank you, Chairman White. And next committee, we're going to have HJR 168 by Chairman White on Donnie Smith. Mr. Smith, will you hold your hand up real quick so everybody knows who you are? Thank you very much. Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you. So I have the privilege also to recognize and introduce Mr. Donnie Smith, a 1980 graduate of UT with a degree in animal science, is a former CEO and chairman of Foster Farms, and the former president and CEO of Tyson Foods Company Incorporated. He spent the majority of his career with Tyson, starting in poultry operations in Tennessee before moving with the company's headquarters to Springdale, Arkansas, where he worked as a commodity buyer. He slowly worked his way up, gaining management experience and insight into logistics, purchasing, operations, and health and safety before being named president and CEO in 2009. In 2014, he and his wife Terry pledged $3.2 million to the UT to establish an endowment for international sustainable agriculture. In 2018, they also funded the Smith Center for International Sustainable Agriculture at UT's Institute of Agriculture. With that, thank you very much for being here and giving of your time and of your career and experience.
Thank you, Chairman White, for that explanation. The next consideration will be HJR 167 by Representative Vital. Representative Vital, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's my privilege to introduce David Watson for reappointment to the University of Tennessee Board of Trustees. David Watson has already been serving on the board since 2022. A proud 1973 graduate of UT and a third-generation Tennessean, David is co-founder and co-owner of Mountain View Auto Group, well known in the Chattanooga area, and owns 7 dealerships. Outside his professional achievements, Mr. Watson and his family are committed to education across the board, both civically and philanthropy-wise. He is also an avid sportsman and a dedicated member of many organizations, including the Wildlife Federation, Ducks Unlimited, and several other groups committed to conservation and fish and wildlife. He previously served on the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission, and with that committee and chairman, I present Mr. David Watson, a friend and a neighbor. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Vital. Members, without objection, we're going to go out of session so we can hear from our nominees. We're out of session. Gentlemen, I'm going to call your name real quick. Just give us a quick hand so we know who everybody is, and then we'll start with Mr. Smith here, okay? So Mr. Smith, raise your hand. Mr. Compton, and then lastly, Mr. Watson. All right. Brief opening remarks. Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for allowing me to be here today. It's been a great honor to serve on the board at the University of Tennessee. As you heard, proud graduate of what is now known as the Herbert College. And a little bit about me, having spent all of my career in agriculture, it's a privilege to be able to have some kind of influence on UTIA and its ability to support the largest economic sector in the state. So again, keep it really brief. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much. Next up is Mr. Compton. Mr. Compton, go ahead.
Yes, thank you again for the possibility to be reconfirmed. You may remember that Donnie and I were confirmed in 2018, which was the beginning of the UT Focus Act. And at the time, the UT board had 20 plus board members. And we were here that day to walk out of here with 10, but we walked out with 5 as there was encouragement to start with a clean slate. And we heard concerns. And we went across the state. We met with many of you. We met with students. We met with faculty. We met with parents. We met with alumni to see what those concerns were. And we found out that many of them were, in fact, needed to be addressed. And so we went to work right away addressing some of the concerns you've raised. One of the first things we did was make the decision to hire Randy Boyd in as president. Slightly unconventional, I'll leave it at that, but he has been nothing short of outstanding. And the president then has gone across the state, and we now have new chancellors in each of the campuses with a chancellor search currently underway in Chattanooga. One of your concerns with that was athletics back in 2018, and I'm happy to report athletics is in a great position right now. So thank you for the opportunity to serve.
Thank you, Mr. Compton. Last up, Mr. Watson, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank y'all for the opportunity to be here today. And it's been a great privilege for me to be able to serve on the board since 2022. And I am a Vol for life, so it's an easy thing to remember about me. Thank y'all.
Opening remarks from our nominees. Representative McKenzie, you asked to speak?
We can go back in session.
We can go back into session, is that okay? Members, do we have any questions for our nominees? Without seeing none, any objection to go back into session? Without seeing none, we're back in session. Representative McKenzie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for all that you do for the university. It's a great institution. It is our flagship land grant university, and happens to be in my district, and I take great pride in that. And so what I'll ask, from folks at the university and the folks, put these things together is consider me. I don't necessarily have to nominate these fine individuals, but I should be included in the process in that, it sits in my backyard, and I've gone from, selling lineups to having brothers that play there, and son graduating in May, and nephews that were, All-American there. It's part of the fabric. And so for me to be left off of this, I just ask for consideration and intentionality going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative McKenzie. Any other comments for our nominees? On seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote in the normal process. So members, we'll be considering House Joint Resolution 167 for the confirmation of David Watson. Do I have a motion? I have a second. I have a motion, a second. Any objection to the question? Without seeing an objection to the question, Madam Clerk, will you go ahead and take the vote? Members, please vote. Madam Clerk, go ahead and take the vote.
Mr. Chairman, you have 17 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you very much. Members, David Watson, HJR 167. We'll move on to calendar and rules. Next up is HJR 168 by confirmation of Donnie Smith. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? We have a motion and a second. Is there any considerations? Upon seeing none, any objection to the question? No objection to the question. We will be voting on HJR 168, the confirmation of Donnie Smith. Madam Clerk, go ahead and take the vote. Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Mr. Chairman, you have 17 ayes and 0 nays.
Upon a majority of vote, HJR 168, confirmation of Donnie Smith, moves on to calendar and rules. Next up is HJR 169, confirmation of John Compton. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Not seeing any discussion. Any objection to the question? No objection to the question. We'll be voting on HJR 169, confirming John Compton. Madam Clerk, take the vote. Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Mr. Chairman, you have 17 ayes and 0 nays.
On a majority of the members voting, HJR 169, the confirmation of John Compton. We'll move on to calendar and rules. Gentlemen, thank you very much. You can take your seats if you wish. Next up will be HJR 186, confirmation of DeWitt Booth. If you'll come up to the microphone. Members, we're going to do the singular one here because this is the last one that Chairman White has, and we'll take Mr. Booth here. Chairman White, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Chairman Sapicki. It is my pleasure to introduce to you for the UT Southern Advisory Board, Mr. DeWitt Booth. Mr. DeWitt Booth began his career in banking as a janitor at the age of 15 and continued in the industry as he attended classes at Martin Methodist, now UT Southern. Throughout his career in banking, he served in various roles, including the vice president of the Bank of Frankenweenie, Frankenweed.
Frankenweed.
In Pulaski, Mr. Booth has also
that,
spent a
Steve.
significant portion of his career serving on various boards, including the Giles Company, Industrial Development Board, and Southern Tennessee Regional Health Systems Hospital Board. Mr. Booth was set to become a member of the Martin Methodist Board of Trustees in 2021, but due to the acquisition, he did not at that time. Over the years, he has been regularly involved in the campus boards, the Student Advisory Board, and the President's Council. Thank you for being here and welcome.
Members, you've heard the explanation. Without objection, we're going to go out of session so we can hear from Mr. Booth. Mr. Booth, you are recognized for comments.
Good morning. I'm a retired banker. I was raised in Giles County in Pulaski, Tennessee, spent all of my life there. Father of 3, grandfather of 5. I've tried to be a good servant to our community. I'd like to be a good servant to the college that I graduated from, which has now become a part of the UT system.
Members, you've heard the comments by our nominee. Any questions for our nominee? Seeing no questions, without objection, we'll go back into session. We're back in session. Members will be any comments while we're in session? Members will be considering HJR 186 to confirmation of DeWitt Booth. Do I have a motion? Second. We have a motion and a second. Any comments? Not seeing any comments. Any objection to calling the question? No objection seen. Madam Clerk, will you take the vote on HJR 186, please? Members, please vote. Madam Clerk, take the vote.
Mr. Chairman, you have 17 ayes and 0 nays.
HJR 186, confirmed by a majority of the members here on the confirmation of DeWitt Booth, has been approved. You're on the calendar and rules, Mr. Booth. Thank you very much for your service to Tennessee.
Thank you.
Members, I'll be turning the gavel back over to Chairman White.
Thank you, Chairman Sapicki. Very efficient. Members, now we're going to go back to HJR 165, item 1 on your calendar today, and also number 6, HJR 194. HJR 165 is the confirmation of Mr. Alan Carter, the University of Tennessee Advisory Board. And we will have Leader Cochran make the introduction.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very honored to introduce to you not only a constituent of mine, but a very good friend. Alan Carter is the owner of Athens Insurance Agency, graduated from UT Knoxville with a degree in finance. He served on the boards for the Tennessee Historical Commission, the United Way of McMinn County Living Heritage Museum, many others. He currently serves on the board of directors for Athens Federal Foundation, the Grace House, the local homeless shelter. The Pat Summit Foundation. He's the chairman of the Tennessee Wildlife Federation and on the board of trustees for Tennessee Wesleyan University. He's a member currently of the UT Knoxville Advisory Board, has been there since 2021. He's a great pillar of our local community, a contributor to local education, and he loves the University of Tennessee, my alma mater, and I'm honored to present him to you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman Cochran. Before we get to you to speak, let's also go to House Joint Resolution 194, which is item 6. This is for the confirmation of the appointment of Stephen Maupin, the University of Tennessee at Martin Advisory Board. And Representative Grills, you have the honor. You recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I told the governor's office that I didn't need anything prepared for me to introduce Stephen because I knew him very well. And they said, that's exactly why we need to prepare something for you because you know a lot about him. But Stephen and I come from the same town, same church, same friend set. So we have a lot in common. But he began his career on his family row crop farm in Dyer County, where they still raise corn, soybeans, wheat, and cattle. He graduated from the University of Tennessee at Martin, where he received his bachelor's degree in animal science in 94. And in 95, he began working for the Tennessee Farm Bureau Federation and stayed there for 27 years. For the last 11 of those years, Stephen was the director of public policy division, working primarily in policy and legislative development activities at the state and federal levels. In 2022, Stephen was appointed by the Tennessee Soybean Promotion Council to serve as their executive director, where he is responsible for assisting the council in managing the investment of soy checkoff dollars that are used to fund soybean research and market development and education. Stephen is also a member of the UT Commission on Agriculture. And not to mention, he's just a pretty good, down-to-earth, good guy. And so with that, I'm honored to recommend him.
Thank you, Representative Grills, very much. Appreciate it. So with that objection, we'll go back and start with Mr. Carter. We're going to go out of session. And Mr. Carter, take a minute and introduce yourself.
Yes, sir. I want to thank you all very much for what you do. I have a lot of respect for you all for taking care of the children of our state. So thank you. A little bit about me. I was born in Athens, Tennessee. My mother was a major ed at UT. She was in special education. My father played tennis at UT and he went to law school there. So there was no choice. I had to go to the University of Tennessee. And I'm just really grateful for my experience. I love serving on the advisory board of Chancellor Donde Plowman and ultimately to the board of trustees at UT, which I think is doing an absolutely wonderful job. So thank you for letting me be here and for your thoughts about me being reappointed.
Thank you very, very much. Let's now go to Mr. Stephen Maupin on House Joint Resolution 194, the University of Tennessee Martin Advisory Board. You're recognized.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. And it's good to see a lot of those of you that I know in the room and appeared before this committee many times. But this is really an honor to be nominated to be on UT Martin's advisory board. As it was mentioned, I graduated from there. And plainly put, the University of Tennessee at Martin took a shy plowboy from a very rural area and made me into someone. Many of y'all in here may have disagreements with that, but it did everything that it was supposed to do for a student. And I will be proud to be a part of this advisory board to carry on the momentum that Chancellor Freeman has started. And I'm a big supporter of him and his staff and what's going on there. And I just look forward to just being a part of UT Martin's future and carrying it on for several more years. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you so very much. Members of the committee, any questions you'd like to ask of our guest today or after those introductions? I see none, so any objection, we call on the question. Let's go back into session, and without objection, call on the question. We have a motion and a second. We're on item number 1, House Joint Resolution 165 for the confirmation of Mr. Alan Carter, University of Tennessee Advisory Board. You already got a motion second. Yeah. Any further questions? If not, let's ask the clerk to open up the board for voting. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, you have 17 ayes and 0 nays.
House Joint Resolution 165 moves out to calendar and rules. Thank you very much. We're now on item number 6, House Joint Resolution 194. You got a motion and a second for the confirmation of Mr. Stephen Maupin, University of Tennessee Martin Advisory Board. Any objection to the question? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, call the roll. Madam Clerk, go ahead and call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, you have 17 ayes and 0 nays.
Without objection, House Joint Resolution 194 moves on to calendar and rules. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Appreciate your time and all that you give to the state of Tennessee and to our higher education. Thank you very much. Okay, members, we're going to jump right in. We do have one member that Representative Reedy, House Bill 552, which is item number, what is that item number? Item number 38 by Representative Reedy. He has an out-of-town guest, and he has to take that out of order. So item number 38. Your motion in the second. You are recognized, Representative Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To put this in proper posture, I do have an amendment that we need to put on. The tracking code is 4159.
4159. Is it rewrite the bill or is it just an added?
That's just a correction.
Just a correction. We have a motion to hear the amendment, second to hear the moment. You're recognized, Representative Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. It's I'll read what it does. And it was on the second page, if you have the amendment, item number 3, immediately notify the LEA personnel serving on the LEA's threat assessment team created pursuant code 49-6-2701 And then the change was, or the employee of the public charter schools who is designated to receive such notifications when an early warning sign is entered into the system for a student.
Okay, members, anyone have a question of Representative Reedy on the explanation of that amendment? Representative McKenzie, you're okay? Okay, we got a motion. Do we have a second to adopt the amendment? Okay, we're on amendment 4159. All those in favor of adding that amendment to House Bill 522 indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Your bill is properly amended, Representative Reedy.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I do have a guest here, Dr. Amy Grosso, that would like to speak in favor of this piece of legislation. So if we could go out of session.
Okay, members, without objection, we're going out of session. And would our guests come up, and when you have a seat, we'll have the microphone turned on. Just introduce yourself for the live streaming. You are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Amy Grosso. I have a PhD in counseling and counselor education. Previously served as a mental health counselor, a lot of mental health education work. Specifically for the last decade, I've been within K-12 education and the role of student well-being within school safety. I worked as the director of behavioral health services at a large school district, overseeing social workers, threat assessment process, suicide screening, and I currently am the expert in residence at Raptor.
Thank you. Members, questions or Representative Reedy, I'll let you, do you have anything you'd like to start out with before I go to the committee?
Mr. Chairman, let's go to the committee first.
Okay, Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So from my reading of this bill, you're going to identify students with behavioral issues in public schools and charter schools. And then that information is going to follow that student. I don't see any records retention in here, so I'm assuming it's going to follow them for their life in K through 12 education. Is that correct?
You're recognized, ma'am.
That is a decision that is based on lawmakers. That is not my expertise to testify on what the record retention would be. It's on the purpose of the bill.
Thank you. So, but as an expert, so I will say, yes, it's going to follow them their entire life. So if they have an event in the second grade where they're disruptive and they're messing up on the school bus, they're messing up on the playground, this information is going to follow them the rest of their youth until they graduate high school. So as a professional in this field, isn't that a bad thing? Don't children evolve? Don't children do self-correction? Don't they do things that are maybe mischievous at a certain age? And all kids, I had 3 boys. Boys mature a lot slower than girls, as we all can probably attest to. But isn't that information, can't that information be used as a sword or a hammer and not a tool of correction and guidance? If there's a gotcha out there, if they hadn't done anything or they do something in the 8th grade and they can point back and say, well, in the 2nd grade, you had 5 instances where folks reported you. As a professional, isn't that a bad thing?
You're recognized.
Thank you. I think it's important to note that, that's already happening in schools within a discipline process, that if students are disciplined, those records go with them. The aim of this bill is too often after a mass tragedy at a school has happened, we often refer to active shooters, but it could also be a student dying by suicide, that everybody starts putting pieces of the puzzle together. And you realize that there's little bitty changes that students have that nobody was able to put together because on their own, it wasn't something for cause of concern or intervention. So the bill aims that there's a way for an LEA to start putting those pieces of the puzzle together so that the bus driver might notice the little girl that always had tons of friends and now is by herself. It gets put in the system. The teacher might notice a change too. On the back end, a qualified individual such as a school counselor is then able with parent support to provide intervention, not discipline. The aim is to be able to assist students before a crisis occurs.
You recognize?
Yeah,
Follow up.
this is my final question. Thank you, Chairman. And so, you know, as we discussed, what came out of schools, you know, when I was in school, you had corporal punishment, paddling, and what ended up happening in a lot of diverse school districts, like not in Knox County, African Americans made up about 10% of the population, but were receiving 90% of the paddlings in that particular, in like a 3 or 4 year period. So what happens is a lot of things are perceptions. I don't think there's any racism. I think it's just biases. People are used to kids in their circle behaving a certain kind of way. And if someone's outside behaving a little differently, maybe a little more aggressive, a little less aggressive, that they're being put into this category. And to your point, yes, you're right. Discipline records travel, but this is more than discipline record. This digs down to he's had a bad day and he looks a little lonely. She looks a little paranoid, and all of these sub things are now, and if there is a discipline, that these things are going to follow. I truly get the intent of this, but this could be used for nefarious reasons. And that's my biggest concern. Yeah, if you were in charge of everything, but as this bill reads, as this bill exists, LEAs can do some serious damage, and charter schools in particular, because they have an enclosed group, can do some serious damage to our children if this isn't done with a loving, knowing, and diverse touch. So how would you respond to that in terms of the past, what the past has been when minor offenses occurred and discipline was issued, kind of immediate, and this is an immediate thing with paddling, and now you're going to put it in a computer system that's going to follow them. And that's my first question. Then the second one is, couldn't this piece of legislation be used for heavy-handed reasons by, let's call them unsavory charter schools and members of school systems?
Okay, response, and then I'll go to the next member.
I think it's hard to answer hypotheticals because I think on the same end, you could say the bill could be used for good and that students who normally would be disproportionately disciplined, that they can actually get the intervention that they need instead of only being on a discipline track.
Thank you. Chairman Spicky.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask some clarifying questions for you, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
And so I think I understand where the sponsor of the bill is coming from on this. When you talk to mental health professionals, there's a telltale sign of a student or an individual that gets into a mental health stress, mental health crisis. It doesn't happen one day. There are things that lead up to it, but the problem is these students have different touches throughout the day of different people. And if I understand what this legislation does, it allows somebody, a adult or a supervisor or a teacher, to say, hey, little Johnny or Jenny is not looking right today, and just put a data point in there to where the mental health professionals can come behind and look at all this and see maybe there's a pattern developing where they can get a hold of the parents and say, hey, we may have an issue here we need to start to take a look at. Can you set an appointment with us to come in and we can have a discussion? Is that the premise of what the bill is trying to do? Chairman White.
You're recognized.
Absolutely. I became very aware of this, not when we talk even about active shooters, but within suicide. That's my background before even school safety, is how do we reduce the rate of suicide in students? And I was doing suicide prevention training with bus drivers, and bus drivers know what to do in a crisis, but they're never given an opportunity to say what they see in changes in students that they really care about and that they see from day to day. So that's one example of what can be put in there. So it's used to positively get ahead, stop waiting until a student is in crisis to be able to provide the support they need, and involving the parent into that to let the parents know what's going on so that they can work together as a team.
Any follow-up?
And so would you agree as a professional that in a structured, sanitized setting, you may not get the same reaction of someone in mental crisis as somebody that sees a casual touch throughout the day to get a better look at, is this something serious? Or as a mental health professional looks at all the data points, it's just somebody having a bad day. Would that also lend credence to this assumption?
You want to follow up?
Yes, sir. That it is. Schools counselors every day get brought things. And a lot of times it's not until a crisis because we're asking educators to hold on to information until it raises to a level to say something about. So giving them the opportunity to be able to provide intervention and support students before a crisis is critical.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We have one more before we move on. Representative Johnson, would you like to be recognized?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my curiosity lies with, and we always did threat assessments at my school system whenever a student made a threat. So are you talking about doing a threat assessment when a student hasn't made any particular threat, they are just exhibiting some behaviors? Is that what this bill does?
Recognize.
As I read the bill, no, the bill is how do we even start supporting students before it gets to a threat assessment process? Because there are often changes a student has before they make a threat, and it's how do we support the students? Now, the bill does say if it needs to be elevated to a threat assessment, it can, but it's not that every time a student says something that it's a threat assessment.
Recognize.
Okay.
Representative Johnson.
I worked in intervention, so I worked with emotionally disturbed, behavior disordered kiddos, and it was very important to pay close attention to those behaviors and what they mean. However, I also had a lot of students that people misinterpreted their behaviors. After Columbine, my school system, however many thousands miles away from Denver, Colorado, outlawed trench coats, which really had zero to do with what happened. But that's what they did. And so sometimes folks go to extremes with behaviors that they think are particularly dangerous, and it puts a label on a kid that they literally never get rid of. Mm-hmm. And I got a lot of those kids because I was a receiving school for a region in our county. And once that child got a label, they really couldn't go back to their original school because that label never came off, even though they had no ill intent to their classmates. So I do see the importance of paying attention to those signs, but also what programs do we have in place? Because most school systems that I'm aware of don't have the mental health counselors available that they are going to need. So we're recognizing these kids, but then what?
Okay, any follow-up?
No, I think I would like to point out that earlier we identify a student as struggling, that the intervention is easier than once it's a crisis point. In staff times, when you're in a full-blown crisis, a school counselor could be working with that for an entire day. So they miss those opportunities to do the smaller interventions with students.
Thank you very much. One more follow-up.
But we've got to fund the programs for these folks when we find them. And if we're not doing that, there's not a point. But thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Representative Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And anytime we're talking about information on someone, especially students, there's a security question and the privacy. Can you explain a little bit on the input and who has access and the security side of what we're talking about here?
Recognize.
Yes, sir. I think first it's that each LEA will have the choice of what software system they would want to use. So it's part that, but any educator should be able to put in if they see a change in a student. Now, that information should not go to every educator, but as qualified individual like a school counselor, administration, to be able to see that. Because not everybody needs to see every concern that's put in on a student, only the qualified individuals that do then help support intervention, work with the families.
Representative Hurt. You got it? Okay, members, that was all I had on the questions. Representative Reedy, you're recognized while we're out of session.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Dr. Grosso, thank you for being with us today. And of course, in the amended language, and I will read that the LEA or public charter schools personnel receiving notification of early warning sign of a student pursuant to subdivision D3 shall review the notification and any notification of the student previously received and determine whether further action is needed to address the student's behavior. And of course, my question is, I think it's more than just a violent student. I'm thinking of an abused child that may be showing up, that you're seeing somebody in your classroom that maybe they're not being fed right at home or notice bruising, so they're being abused. And to answer one of the committee members' question is the Department of Mental Health, and it's outside of the bill, but it's something that we've already passed, Mr. Chairman, that Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse had came forward, and there's over 400 positions in Houston County at the high school where my wife is an educator. It's a mental health professionals right there. And when they see something going on with a young person, they will take them aside. And my wife says, this young lady's doing a great job in correcting that action. But we keep talking about the behavior of students, and after somebody dies or a suicide, everybody comes to the table and says, we recognized this situation. Why didn't we catch it and do something about it? It was 8 years ago when I was on the education committee. We were kicking this same can down the road, and it's like, we need to do something. But out of your professional experience, is there any other states talking about this same situations, trying to get behind this problem and helping their youth in their schools?
You recognize, ma'am?
Yes, many states are. I mean, a lot of times it's an individual district recognizing that they want to do something. But I think what you're saying too, so often we think about student safety and only focus on mass acts of violence, which are important for us to focus on. But the student who's being abused, that's a safety concern too. Students being hungry, students experiencing homelessness. As educators, we have to do certain things, but that's when it's reported. A lot of times there's shame and stigma that a family won't reach out. Would we be able to identify a student in that situation earlier on? So it's all about student well-being and being able to provide support until it's a crisis point.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Representative Jones, you have one follow-up? You're recognized.
I did want to say that there is a bill that they passed in Colorado. Colorado had one of the top youth suicide rates in the country. Colorado passed a bill that any K-12 student who wanted counseling could ask for it. They were allowed 3 sessions of counseling. If the counselor decided they needed to continue, then they could continue that counseling. And they just signed up on a website. Their parents helped them fill out the applications, whatever. But after 2 years of that bill being in place, the suicide rate in Colorado began dropping. So it clearly helps to offer true mental health therapy to those folks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, I have no one else, so any objection to going back in session? Here now. Thank you so very much for your coming in, and sorry we didn't get to you last week. It was full committee. Representative Reedy, I'm gonna come back to you for any and no one else?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, committee members. And it was this fall, I had multiple roundtable discussions of such activities, and it was the mass threats at schools, reaching out to my district, to the sheriff's department, to the juvenile judges. And of course, that's where I come up with a few bills in talking about the education behavioral records. Yes, they're being produced, but they're not following the students. So you'll hear legislation on that soon, but then also a TASER study. Well, what do we do about contract beds when we find somebody going astray? And then the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse reached out to me and said, Representative Reedy, you do know that if the parent and the be it the LEA, be it the principal or the director of schools, if there is a decision between the parent and that leadership in the school district, they can decide to have a mental evaluation done on this young person, and it's approved of. And they pay for it and not the LEA, which I find very important. But then also with this piece of legislation, once again, we're looking to stop some of the stuff that we're seeing, and it just breaks everybody's heart when after the fact, be it a suicide, a murder, whatever takes place. But keeping in mind, members, in this particular bill, that reports made pursuant to this section must comply with the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, which you may know as FERPA. At this time, Mr. Chairman, I could take questions.
Okay, any final questions of the sponsor? Reverend Kinsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the sponsor, so as I discussed with your expert testimony there, is there a sunset on this data gathering process? If it happens to someone in the first grade, does it follow them all the way through graduation?
Representative Reedy.
Representative McKenzie, there is not a sunset, but I think with the information contained within the bill, once we start looking at that, I'm thinking it's going to be resolved before there's a huge record of bad attitudes, bad habits of these individual students. And that's where I believe it's, like I've already mentioned, with the Department of Mental Health, it's over 400 of our schools have these mental health professionals in there, and the state of Tennessee, and we got to slowly add to it, but the hope is to have 1,800 of these young people. And it's not just because of funding, it's because of the backlog of the professionals coming out of the colleges that will be able to help us. So as far as the sunset, no, sir.
Okay, one last follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just think that's a dangerous precedent that we set, because, we tell our kids what you do in this data-driven world. You take a picture, it's going to follow you forever. That's a problem. If there's not a purge at some point, because I think you'll admit that kids change. A kid that's depressed today may not be depressed next year or even tomorrow. And so for that to follow, I have an issue with that. But and my last question, as I read this bill and everything about it, it looks like a red flag law that you're trying to put into place for our children. So is this a red flag indicator kind of law bill that you're presenting today?
You recognize, Representative Reedy.
In my opinion, no, sir, it is not.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, members. We're on House Bill 522, item number 38 on your calendar. I have no one else on the list to speak. Any objection to me calling the question? Hearing none. On House Bill 522, Madam Clerk, would you take the roll? Madam Clerk, call the roll. You recognize?
Mr. Chairman, you have 14 ayes, 0 nays, and 3 present not voting.
Thank you very much, members. House Bill 522 moves out to finance. Thank you, Chairman Reedy. Members, I'm going to be jumping around a little bit because we got members out here who've been waiting on us for a couple of weeks. But one housekeeping thing, item number 36 on your calendar today, House Bill 225, has been taken off notice. We also have another member who has a guest from out of town, I believe. Representative item number 20, House Bill 39, by Representative Davis. Make sure we House Bill 30, item number 20. Let me get to it real quick. Yes, House Bill 39, item number 20 on your calendar. You are recognized, Representative Davis. You got a motion and a second. Do you have any amendments?
It was added in subcommittee.
Do we need to add it again? Yeah. Let's get the amendment number so we can add it in full committee. That amendment number.
3973, sir.
Okay. Got a motion, second on the amendment. Any objection to adding the amendment to the bill? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The ayes have it. Your bill is properly amended. You are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee. I've got some guests that are here to speak to this bill, but a couple of them that were not here, that weren't able to come this week, that were here last week, that I feel like are important to recognize. One of them, they're taking their ACTs, so we're hoping that they're doing well. One of the young ladies that was here last week, her name is Eliza Gurton, and at age 10, she founded Be Her Hero. It's a nonprofit organization dedicated to addressing period poverty in East Tennessee. And one of the things that I thought was really important that I wanted her to speak to was she lives in Greene County. And she collected over 35,000 products during Hurricane Helene to ensure that every public school in Greene County was stocked with those feminine hygiene products and no woman was affected by that hurricane and by the flooding, and that they would be without products. And then also from Knox County Schools, we had Aya, but she's unable to be here too. But we on our school system, on our school board, we have student representatives and they're non-voting members. And so Aya was here to speak to this issue last week. But I would love to have our guests come and speak if we can go out of session and have them speak.
Okay,
Sir.
who do you have? How many do you have today?
Just two, sir.
Just two?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Without objection, we are out of session. Come on up, and I'll give each of you about a minute to share with the committee. And let's see, the first one. Okay, Natalie Schilling. Okay. Well, if you state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Natalie Schilling. I will be reading on behalf of a counselor in Granger County. As a high school counselor in a rural East Tennessee county for 19 years, I hear the term period poverty and immediately see the faces of young women throughout my career who've sat across my desk, stopped me in the hallway, or called me to attend to them in a restroom. As an educator, I feel that addressing the issue of period poverty is no different than addressing the need to provide students who can't afford breakfast or lunch with meals at school. We know students cannot fully focus on their studies if they have basic needs not being met. It is with heartfelt sincerity that I call upon you to consider this cause. As a school counselor working in the trenches each day with these young people who are experiencing this need, please help combat this necessity and assist in relieving the burden. May I leave you with this personal anecdote? My school identifies students who may not be receiving gifts during the holidays. We interview these students to inquire about their ranking of greatest need items for gifts: coats, shoes, underclothes, pants. And then we ask if they have any special want items, not PlayStations or Xboxes, but maybe Axe body spray or Bath and Body lotion. Small items, but luxurious if you don't have them. I've completed these types of interviews with countless students, and many of the female students have listed pads or tampons as their want items that they most desire to have for the holidays. There is a need. This is a real aspect of poverty. As the face of young women throughout my career race through my mind, please know that I truly appreciate your consideration of HB 39 to address this need for female high school students in our state. Amanda Johnson, Doctorate of Education, School Counselor in Granger County Schools.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
Madeline, you're recognized. State your name for the record.
Thank you. Madeline Nocton, reading on behalf of Aya Agal. In Knoxville, the Knox County School Board supplies free period products in the bathrooms at most of our schools. Through the campaigning of our organization, Free Period Knox, the initiative this summer received unanimous bipartisan support from the board. Bins were placed in the girls' bathrooms across campus, and despite what some thought, no one has misused or obstructed the products. Instead, they appreciate them. Students feel supported and the cost is minimal. People only use the products that they need, and most of the time it takes a week or so for a 7x7 bin to be empty. A sophomore recently told me that having these products in the bathroom made her feel like the school actually cared about her. I believe this is true for a lot of people, including myself. This is why we must pass the Menstrual Hygiene Products Accessibility Act. No student should have to choose between their health and their education. By passing this bill, we show that we care about the dignity and respect of all young women in Tennessee. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Members, while we're out of session, anybody want to ask a question of our guest? Representative Johnson.
Not to ask a question, just thank you so much for being here and for speaking up. Appreciate it.
Thank you all so very much. Well, thank you for giving your time and being here. Appreciate that very much. Okay, without objection, we're now back in session. Haven't been on the list, so Representative David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so essentially, I'll explain this very simply. Last year, when we brought this bill forward, we were unable to fund it. What was so I just thought inspirational was that Aya and then also a former student representative went to Knox County School Board and asked that they implement this to where in all of the high schools, they would have those emergency supply products placed in the bathroom. Knox County School Board approved this. And so we have essentially a pilot program, and we were able to get the figures and the dollar amount as to the cost really attached to that because based in real time, based upon what Knox County Schools has done. And so that was one thing that I thought was really important and impactful is that we brought true figures to our governing body. Also, these girls are so clever. Whenever in the restrooms, whenever
Good
those
finance.
supplies get low, they have a QR code. And so at each of the high schools, they have a student ambassador that they will get a text message through that QR code, and those girls are able to restock those. And I just think it's a wonderful tribute to how professional and how compassionate these young ladies are in looking out for one another. And so I stand ready for any questions.
Thank you. Members, any other questions of Representative Davis? Representative Johnson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm reading here grant, but does it just fund every school? How does that funding work?
You recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So essentially, that's what we're wanting to do. We wanted to make it to where those grant funds would go to the Department of Education, and we based it on student population. That's what we used as Knox County Schools. So we looked at the number of young ladies that are of a certain age in that high school and based that figure upon it. Knox County Schools, there's about, I think that they buy them in bulk. So it's about 150 pads to a box. And what they're able to do is kind of say, okay, I think they cost like $56, $57 a box. So they're able to really look at how many boxes have been utilized for that student population and then extrapolate from there. And so that's where in that amended language, it states, if you look at section C1, it talks about 1,000 or more students will get a grant for, $450. So that's where we kind of estimated certain number of student population for the product that they would need.
So your plan really does cover everybody. It's just a matter of asking for it.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. No one else? Anyone objected to the question being called on House Bill 39? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, would you open the vote? Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, you have 17 ayes and 0 nays.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee.
House Bill 39 moves out to finance. Thank you. I'm going to get a couple of members up here. I'm going to go to Representative McCallman. Come on up. And then I go to Representative Hardaway after that. Those are members sitting out there. Members, we're on item number 22, House Bill 861. For those of you excusing yourself, if we would step out quietly so we can continue the committee. And thank you for being here. House Bill 861, you have a motion and a second. Any amendments on this bill?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I believe it should be traveling with it, but in case it's not, it is drafting code 003847.
Motion is second. Is it traveling with it? We do need to adopt it in this committee. Members, any objection to adding the amendment to the bill for discussion? No objection. So all in favor of Amendment 3847 being added to House Bill 861, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Your bill is recognized. You want to be recognized as a no, just let the clerk know. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, what House Bill 861 does is simply a codification of current state board education rules, which require an LEA to give notice to parents or guardians at least 10 days before an IEP hearing and provide a copy of the draft IEP at least 48 hours before the meeting. This bill, like I said, does codify this practice. Additionally, the bill will require a copy of all evaluations and assessments taken for the purposes of the student's IEP to be provided to the parent and guardian versus requested. And with that, I stand ready for questions and renew my motion.
Okay, with that explanation, now you didn't have any guests or anything, right?
No, sir.
Representative Johnson, I recognize you.
Thank you, Mr. This is already federal law, and we already do this in our public schools. But I am curious. I did have some response from constituents who were school psychologists, and that's that was my concern with the amendment. Sending home some of the testing that we do before they get to the meeting and before those results are able to be explained to them. It's not always, if you're not a school psychologist, if you don't understand what the testing is, sometimes those results can be kind of scary if you're just reading them on your own and you don't understand what is being presented. It's not a natural thing that the average parent would understand. Even some teachers and principals don't understand them. So their concern, the school psychologist's concern that I heard from, was some of those test results, they would rather wait until the meeting so they could go over and they're not stressed and concerned and not misunderstanding those results before they've had that explanation. Sometimes you're finding out for the first time that maybe your child has a disability of some sort. And it can be devastating to a family, especially if they don't fully understand the implications. So I'm wondering, what you're thinking about in that respect.
You recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Johnson, this is essentially giving parents an ability to have a shot of reading and formulating questions of their own before they go into this meeting. Oftentimes they're handed a packet of papers this thick. This is basically to equip the parents to not have a deer in the headlights look. Obviously, there may be stuff that they may not understand, but it allows them a chance to ask questions about that, to have questions formulated before they come into that meeting. So that's what the purpose of this was for. This was actually brought to me by a constituent, and if all of our districts are already doing this, I wouldn't be standing here with a bill. So,
Well, they're required by federal law to do it, so they should be doing it in the draft IEP. It was just
Your
some of those psychological
your mic.
reports that folks were-
Hang on one second. Your mic went off. Thank you. The reason for that, I didn't recognize you. You were recognized. Turn the mic back on. You're recognized.
Sorry about that. That is my concern, is that some of those results can be misinterpreted so quickly, and it causes a lot of stress for the family. Just, I don't know if maybe they should send out, if they're sending it out early, to send out notes, but we all absolutely can't overwhelm parents. I've been in those meetings though, and when someone has evaluations from the school psychologist, they tend to be very intentional about explaining those things to the parents. And so I just want to caution folks that some of this information going out without an understanding could be problematic.
Okay, thank you. And my apologies. We did get one member contact our office, Miss Tony Robbins. She had asked to speak today. Is she in the audience? Tony Robbins, do not see her. Okay, she had just sent in a request for him. Okay, Representative Glenn, recognize you while we're.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman,
Commissioners.
and thank you, sponsor. You mentioned this gives parents a chance to come to formulate questions prior to coming to a meeting. I think sometimes that's a double-edged sword. And the reason I say that is because if I read something and I take it a certain way, I'm already coming in with preconceived ideas on information. So if I come in with a preconceived idea or preconceived information, and someone is telling me something different from what I'm reading, then I can assume that they're gaslighting me, not telling me the truth because I can read. So I think sometimes when we are trying to do things like this, and I'm not against giving parents information. That's not what this is about. But I think when we're talking about something like an assessment that has a lot of medical terminology, and I'm not calling any parent who can't read can understand, but I read my medical record sometimes and I have to go in and really Google what it means. And even after that, I still don't understand it. But I do think that this could create an issue where parents come in already with a preconceived and can turn that meeting upside down. Is it possible that this could be something that by request, would that be something that you would be open to?
Representative McCollum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Glenn, as it sits right now under state board rules, which is essentially, it's just state board policy. That is already the case. This is the only change we're making beyond codifying the state board rule would be to make it an opt-out versus an opt-in. There's nothing that says that you as a parent being provided this are forced to read it. You also as a parent would have the ability to say, no, I don't want this information. This is essentially saying you've got parents that don't know that they could request this information. So this is making the LEAs take a proactive step to say, yes, we know 10 days already. We have to schedule this meeting with you. 2 days ahead of time, we'll provide you this information so you can formulate any questions. If you don't want it, you don't have to take it, but it will be provided unless you request it not be.
One more follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I'm reading it right, it is making it a requirement that they provide it, but the parent can deny it. Is that, but the parent, you're not saying that a parent can, how am I putting this? A parent can deny, but you're forcing the school to provide it is what I'm asking. Is that correct?
You recognize?
Thank you, Chairman. For lack of a better phrase, yes, we are making it a requirement to provide. It already has to be ready 2 days ahead of time and available upon request. This is just saying you shall provide, not I can provide.
Were you through, Representative Glenn?
Yeah, you said one more.
There you go. We have Chairman Slater, then I'm going to Chairman Sapicki.
Just one question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one question for the sponsor. Is there anything in this legislation that would prevent, say, a school psychologist from sending a cover letter that just simply gives a brief explanation and then also encourages the parent to come to the IEP meeting with questions? Is there anything that would prevent such a document?
You recognize?
Thank you, Chairman. No, Chairman Slater, there's nothing in this legislation that would prevent the LEA from adopting a policy or a practice of sending a cover letter and encouraging questions upon that scheduling.
Thank you. Chairman Sapicki.
Move previous question.
Previous question been moved. Any objection to the question being called? We're on House Bill 861, item number 22 by Representative McCollum. That objection, Madam Clerk, would you call the vote? Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, you have 16 ayes, 0 nays, and 2 present not voting.
Thank you. House Bill 861 moves out to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Coleman, while you're there, you have item number 23, House Bill 623. Would you like to go ahead and take that one up now? You're recognized. Got a motion to second. Any amendments on that bill?
No, sir.
Okay, you are recognized to explain to the committee 623.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, House Bill 623 as introduced requires the Department of Education to establish enrollment deadlines for voluntary pre-K programs so that at-risk students who will be 4 years old by August 15th must be enrolled by the beginning of the school year, and students who are 4 years old who do not have a disability or who meet the qualifications for enrollment at 3 years of age must be enrolled by August 30th. What this bill seeks to do is enhance school readiness opportunities by increasing access to high-quality early childhood education for 3-year-old children. Currently, students who are age 4 by August 15th can enroll in the state's voluntary pre-K program. These 4-year-olds are accepted immediately during the recruitment and enrollment process, which begins on March 1st. For 3-year-old students, enrollment is accepted, but they are placed on a wait list until October 15th when it's determined if there are vacancies once all the 4-year-old students have been placed. Essentially, what we're doing is revising the deadline to have all eligible 4-year-old students placed by the start of school, thus allowing 3-year-old students to be enrolled by August 30th if vacancies still exist after the placement of all available eligible 4-year-old students. And with that, I stand ready for questions and renew my motion.
Okay, with that explanation, Representative McKenzie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for bringing this bill. The only question I had was, what happens if, say you have openings after the October date, I've got the date,
and you fill it up with 3-year-olds, and someone transfers in, a 4-year-old transfers into the LEA, do they make space available for that 4-year-old?
You recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative McKenzie, I can't speak to that. I don't believe there's anything in the legislation that would speak to that either. I'd imagine it's going to be, if there's no space available, there's no space available.
You have a follow-up? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just quick. Again, thank you for bringing the bill. That was my only, it wasn't really a concern. It's just maybe an opportunity lost. But this makes a whole lot of sense and gets our kids into that literary pipeline sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Anybody else have a question of our sponsor on House Bill 623? Seeing none, any objection to the question being called? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll on House Bill 623? Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, you have 17 ayes and 0 nays.
House Bill 623 moves out to calendar and rules. Thank you, Representative Common.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee.
Okay, I've been sitting out there patiently waiting. Let's get to Representative Hardaway. Item number 21, House Bill 485. Representative Hardaway, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee. And I'll be brief, appreciating.
Any
being,
amendments on your bill?
moved up. No, sir, no amendments.
Okay, thank you.
As is. House Bill 485 sets up hybrid learning, which is the ability for an LEA to schedule in-class and virtual classroom learning on days where we have extreme weather or other emergencies. It's a permissive bill. The local folks will determine how they figure this out, and each LEA is probably going to do it a little differently. But I'll repeat, it's permissive. And I think it will, in essence, have 95 pilot programs, which will allow us to figure out the effectiveness of making sure that each child on an emergency day, where some parents are capable of driving their children to school, other children are forced to walk. Parents have to walk them to and then walk them from. This bill came to me in a discussion at one of my pop-up town halls outside of Hanley Elementary in Orange Mound. And it was sub-freezing, close to 0 wind chill that day. And little children and their parents were making it to school and back. And one stopped to give me an earful. And it's because of her and her precious little baby that we're here today. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll await the will of the committee.
Okay, members, question to Representative Hardaway on his bill. I have been talking to districts. I think a lot of them, the feedback I'm getting, a lot of them may have a little difficulty implementing that. But having said that, I think you bring up a good point. Members, any you recognize, sir? Barrett?
I don't have a comment on the bill, sir. I just wanted to congratulate East High School for defeating Dixon County last night to make it to the state tournament. It was a great game. I was there. I wish you'd been able to go down and watch it with me.
I think I appreciate that. You know, Mr. Chairman, they tend to pick on Shelby every time we turn around, because East Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, and West Tennessee all have good athletic programs. And sometimes we come up short, but sometimes we champs. So I appreciate you, sir.
Okay, Representative Chairman Spicky.
Move previous question.
The question's been called. Any objection to the question being called? We're on House Bill 485. Representative Hardaway, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll? Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, you have 16 ayes and 0 nays.
Okay, House Bill 485 moves out to calendar and rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members.
Representative Bolso, let's go to, you've had one on the calendar for a while. Let's go to item number, item number 30, House Bill 64. Representative Bolso, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do have an amendment on the bill,
What is the amendment number, sir?
003452.
Does it rewrite the bill or is it just added?
It rewrites the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, members, since it rewrites the bill, any objection to adding it to the bill for proper discussion? 1 second. Okay, members, we're just doing the clarification. We're actually on amendment 4021, which was an amendment that I was adding. And so I'm going to need to pass the gavel to Chairman Sapicki.
Members, I have an amendment 00421. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second? Okay. Without objection, we're going to add amendment 004021, and then we will go back to the sponsor for an explanation of the amendment. Without objection, 004021 is on House Bill 0064. Representative Bolso, you're in proper position as amended if you want to present your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, this is a bill that came to me from a constituent over an incident that occurred this past summer. I had a constituent and his wife enroll their high school daughter in a residential summer program at one of our local private universities. And they were asked by the school whether they would mind their daughter being assigned a roommate who was a transgender student, that is a biological boy who identified as a girl. And of course they said yes, they objected. And so their daughter was assigned another girl as a roommate. What they were not aware of, what they were not told, was that the school allowed transgender students to be assigned to that same floor so that in the restrooms and the changing areas and the showers at the end of the hall, their daughter was there sharing those facilities with biological boys who identified as girls. And obviously they very much objected to that. And what this bill seeks to do is to make it clear that in Tennessee, when you have a residential educational program that involves minors, that restrooms, changing facilities, and showers be segregated by sex to protect the privacy and security of young ladies. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm ready for questions.
Okay, members, with that explanation of House Bill 64, questions to of our guest, of our sponsor. Who? Representative McKenzie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sponsor, so I have a great institution in my district that's been educating kids. I think this for decades, and it's a state-run school, Tennessee School for the Deaf. Beautiful campus, and they take students from all over the state. But it's it's an older campus. They have new buildings, but the campus has been around a long time. Gymnasiums and auditoriums and things of that nature. How would this bill affect them? And it is a residential program.
You recognize?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But it may not affect them at all. This applies to multi-occupant bathrooms. So if your school in Knoxville, Representative, simply had single-user restrooms and changing areas and showers, that would have no effect on them.
Follow up.
Thank you. In this case, that's not, they're not as fortunate. They do have cottages, but they also have dormitories that are, for our children who are hearing impaired as they learn in their environment. So with that being the case, that there are dormitory type facilities, how would this bill affect them?
Thank you, Mr.
You're
Chairman.
recognized.
It would affect them in the same way that it would affect every other private or public institution that had a residential educational program that included minors. They would have to make sure that when young ladies went to the restroom, to the changing areas, or to the showers, that those facilities were segregated by biological sex.
Any follow-up, or I'm going to move on? Hey, members, we did have one person who contacted our office to speak on this bill. Is a Miss Eva Franska in the audience? Miss Franska, if you will come forward, have a seat. Members, without objection, we are out of session. If you will take about a minute and a half and share your views, and then we'll move on. You're recognized. State your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Eva Frasca. I'm a nurse and I'm the mother of 3 cisgendered children. And I'm here today to speak in opposition to House Bill 64. You claim that this bill is to protect girls like my 9-year-old daughter. My 9-year-old daughter that you would not give a school lunch to if she was hungry, who you would force to carry the baby of her rapist, and who you have done nothing to protect from befalling the same fate as other 9-year-old little girls just a few miles from here at Covenant. What this bill does is legislate and legitimize hate instead of showing love to kids who so desperately need it. Studies prove that these types of bathroom policies actually increase the risk of sexual and physical assault against transgender and non-binary youth. There is no empirical evidence that this bill will do anything but hurt an already vulnerable population. In places where bathroom bills are already law, both transgender and cisgender children are harassed as a result of these policies. Children who do not meet arbitrary standards of gender conformity risk being humiliated simply for trying to use a restroom. This bill is clearly intended to discourage transgender and non-binary children from participating in the same activities as their peers. Like many bills here in Tennessee, it is designed to discourage these kids from existing. The thing is, though, you cannot legislate things into being uncomplicated. Gender, like identity and love and relationships and being a human, are all complicated and messy and cannot be simplified by decree. When things are complicated, it can be hard to know what the right thing to do is, but this bill, it is the wrong thing to do. It hurts our kids who are already hurting, and it makes life harder for them when their lives are already hard. It seeks to solve a problem that does not exist while ignoring the problems that actually do. I ask the committee to vote no on House Bill 64. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Members, any, let's keep the committee quiet, please. Members, you have any questions of our guest while she's here? Thank you so very much for giving of your time and being here. We're now back in session, members. So I gotta get back to him. Okay, members, we got to do a little rule keeping. Chairman Sapicki, we'll go back to that amendment that we added. Okay.
Members, we have to adopt the amendment 004021. So let's do that real quick. Do I have a motion? Second? We have a motion and a second. Any objection to adopting this bill? Okay, all those in favor of adopting amendment 004021 on the House Bill 64, say aye. Aye. No, no, say, sorry. All opposed, say no. The ayes have it. Motion, amendment 004021 is adopted and placed on the bill.
Thank you very much, Chairman Sapicki. Now we're back on the bill. As we say, properly amended. We have no one. Representative Bosso, you're recognized for last statement.
Mr. Chairman, I would just renew the motion and encourage members to vote in favor of protecting the privacy and security of young ladies in Tennessee.
Okay, members, we're right at 1:30. Any objection to the question being called on this bill? I see none. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, you have 13 ayes and 3 nays.
Sir, sit down. Without objection, House Bill 64 moves out to calendar and rules. All bills unheard in this committee will be moved to next week's calendar. We are adjourned.